I always thought betrayal was something that happened to other people, some tragic event you read about or hear in passing at the bar when a guy drinks too much and starts spilling his guts to whoever will listen. I never thought I'd be that guy. But there I was, standing in the hallway outside our bedroom, holding a single earring in my hand, a delicate, gold teardrop that definitely wasn't Emily's. I knew every piece of jewelry my wife owned, and this wasn't one of them. The air inside our house suddenly felt different, heavier, like it carried a weight I hadn't noticed before. I closed my fingers around the earring, trying to convince myself there was an explanation, but I couldn't think of one that made sense. It was sitting right there on my nightstand, as if whoever left it behind wanted me to find it. I didn't say anything that night. I just watched. Emily was in the shower when I came back into the room, humming some tune like everything was perfectly normal, like she hadn't just been in our bed an hour earlier while I was out running errands. The sheets were freshly changed, which wasn't unusual, but something about the way they were tucked in so perfectly made my stomach twist. I had been married long enough to know that people didn't just start acting different for no reason. It was in the little things, the way she kept fixing her hair in the mirror, the way she barely looked up from her phone when I spoke to her, the way she laughed just a little too hard at something that wasn't even funny. When she finally came to bed, sliding under the covers with that same tired smile, I forced myself to stay calm. "Hey, did someone come by today?" I asked, keeping my voice as casual as possible. She turned to look at me, her expression neutral, but I saw it, the slight hesitation, the barely there pause before she answered. "No, why?" I held up the earring. "Found this on my nightstand." For a split second, I saw something flicker across her face. Surprise? Fear? I couldn't tell, but it was gone just as fast. She reached for the earring, examining it like she had never seen it before. Maybe it's my sister's? She stopped by last week. I didn't take my eyes off her. "Your sister doesn't wear earrings. She's allergic to gold." Emily blinked, her lips parting slightly like she was scrambling for something to say, but then she laughed. "Oh, you're right. Maybe it's from one of my coworkers. Lisa was over last Friday for wine night. Maybe it fell out of her bag or something." I didn't respond. I just set the earring on the nightstand and turned off the lamp. But I didn't sleep. My mind kept turning over every moment from the past few weeks, searching for clues I had ignored, signs I had brushed off. And the more I thought about it, the clearer it became something wasn't right. And I was going to find out exactly what. The next morning, I woke up before Emily, lying still in bed while she slept peacefully beside me. My mind was already working, going over every detail of the night before, replaying her expression when I held up that earring, the way she hesitated before answering. There was something there, something she wasn't saying. I slid out of bed quietly, careful not to wake her, and made my way downstairs. I stood in the kitchen for a while, drinking my coffee and staring at nothing, trying to decide what to do next. I wasn't the type to jump to conclusions, but something in my gut told me I couldn't just let this go. I started with the laundry. Emily never let anyone else do it, claiming I always shrank her clothes, but today I had no problem going through the hamper. The sheets from last night were inside, along with the rest of our usual laundry. Everything looked normal at first, just the usual mix of clothes, towels, and underwear. But then, buried at the bottom, I found something that made my hands tighten into fists. A men's t-shirt. It wasn't mine. It was plain, gray, nothing special, but I knew every shirt in my closet, and this one didn't belong to me. I pulled it out and held it up, turning it over in my hands, checking the tag. Large. Emily always bought me extra-large shirts, claiming she liked how they fit on me. This one wouldn't have even reached my wrists. I stared at it, feeling a slow burn in my chest. There was no reasonable explanation for this. Footsteps sounded on the stairs, and I barely had time to shove the shirt back into the hamper before Emily walked into the kitchen, rubbing her eyes. "You're up early," she said, heading straight for the coffee pot. Couldn't sleep. I leaned against the counter, watching her closely. "Hey, I found something weird in the laundry." She turned slightly, her hand pausing for a split second before she reached for a mug. "Yeah? What?" "A t-shirt. Not mine." She sipped her coffee before answering, her voice casual. "Oh, that must be Lisa's. She borrowed one of my gym shirts last time she was over." I let the silence stretch for a moment, just watching her. "It's a men's shirt." Her fingers tightened around the mug. "Just barely, but I saw it. Maybe it's one of hers. You know how she likes wearing oversized stuff." I nodded slowly, acting like I was considering it, but inside, I knew she was lying. Lisa wasn't a liar, and she definitely wasn't the type to leave random clothes behind at someone else's house. I didn't press further, not yet. I needed more than just suspicion. Emily moved through the morning like nothing was wrong, making breakfast, checking her phone every few minutes, giving me the same usual peck on the cheek before heading out the door. I watched her leave, my mind already working on my next step. I needed proof. I waited an hour before heading upstairs. Her closet was exactly as she had left it, neat and organized. I went through every inch, checking pockets, searching for anything out of place. Then I moved to her nightstand, opening drawers carefully, looking for anything that didn't belong. And that's when I found it. A key. It wasn't one of ours. It was small, brass, attached to a cheap keychain that looked nothing like anything Emily usually carried. I picked it up, rolling it between my fingers, my pulse steady and calm. There was only one reason she would have a key hidden in her nightstand, and I was going to find out exactly where it belonged. I spent the rest of the morning working from home, but my mind wasn't on my job. The key sat next to my laptop, a silent reminder of what I already knew deep down. By noon, I had made up my mind. I grabbed my jacket, took the key, and left the house. It didn't take long to figure out where it went. Emily had a second car, an old sedan she barely used, mostly for days when she didn't want to take her nicer one to work. I had a feeling this key belonged to that car. When I reached the parking lot near her office, I spotted it immediately, parked at the far end where no one usually left their cars. I walked over, glancing around to make sure no one was watching, then slipped the key into the lock. It turned smoothly. I opened the door, slid into the driver's seat, and checked the glove compartment first. A few receipts, some napkins, nothing unusual. But then I opened the center console, and that's when I found what I was looking for. A hotel key card. It was tucked into the corner, barely noticeable, but I recognized the name of the hotel immediately. It was one of those small, out-of-the-way places that people only used for one reason. My chest felt tight, my grip tightening on the key card as I stared at it, my mind racing through every possible explanation. But there wasn't one. Emily was cheating on me. I sat there for a long time, staring at that hotel key, feeling everything shift around me. The suspicion, the doubt, all of it was gone now. This was real. This was happening. And now, I had to decide what to do next. I sat in the driver's seat of her car, gripping the hotel key card so tightly my knuckles turned white. The weight of it in my hand was enough to make my stomach churn, but I wasn't surprised. I had already known, hadn't I? From the moment I found that earring on my nightstand, I knew something was wrong. Still, seeing the proof right in front of me made it real in a way I wasn't prepared for. I forced myself to take a breath and think. There was no point in sitting here, no point in pretending this was some kind of mistake. Emily had been going to this hotel, and I needed to find out why. I pulled out my phone and searched for the hotel's address. It wasn't far, maybe a 10-minute drive from where I was. A small place, the kind of spot people used when they didn't want to be seen. I knew exactly what I would find there, but I still had to see it for myself. I started the engine and drove in silence, my mind turning over every possibility, every excuse she might give, every lie she had already told. When I pulled into the parking lot, I sat there for a moment, just watching. The hotel was nothing special, a generic building with faded signage and a front desk that looked like it had seen better days. I stepped out of the car and walked inside, keeping my expression neutral as I approached the counter. The clerk barely glanced up from his computer, looking bored out of his mind. I slid the key card onto the desk. "Hey, I think I left something in my room last time I stayed. Can you remind me which one this goes to?" The clerk sighed, typing lazily on his keyboard before nodding. "Room 214. He slid the key back toward me and went back to whatever he was doing. I walked down the hall, my pulse steady but my hands tense. The hallway was quiet, the kind of quiet that made everything feel heavier than it was. When I reached the door, I stood there for a moment, just staring at the numbers. This was it. The place she had been coming to behind my back. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The room smelled like cheap air freshener, the kind used to cover up whatever had happened before. The bed was neatly made, the furniture standard and unremarkable, but it wasn't the room itself that mattered. It was the fact that Emily had been here, with someone else. I moved slowly, checking every inch, looking for anything she might have left behind. Then, on the nightstand, I saw it, a bottle of perfume. Not just any perfume. Hers. I picked it up, turning it over in my hand, recognizing the scent immediately. The same one she wore when she wanted to impress someone, the same one she had been wearing more often lately. I set it down carefully, my mind already running through what I had to do next. I couldn't just leave. I needed proof. I pulled out my phone and started taking pictures. The key card, the perfume, the bed, the receipt I found in the trash can with her name on it. Everything. When I was done, I stood in the middle of the room, staring at the evidence of my wife's betrayal, feeling nothing. No anger. No sadness. Just a quiet, steady determination. I left the hotel without looking back, driving home in silence. When I got there, Emily's car was already in the driveway. She was inside, sitting on the couch with her laptop, looking up with a smile when I walked in, like she hadn't just been somewhere else, doing things she would never admit to. "Hey, you're home early," she said, closing her laptop. I set my keys on the counter, watching her. "Yeah, finished work early. Thought I'd come home and spend some time with you." Her smile flickered, just for a second, before she leaned back against the couch. "That's sweet. What do you want to do?" I sat down across from her, resting my elbows on my knees, keeping my eyes on her face. "I don't know. Maybe talk." Something changed in her expression. Just slightly. "About what?" I pulled out my phone, unlocked it, and slid it across the table. She glanced down at the screen, and for the first time, I saw real fear in her eyes. The pictures were right there. The hotel, the key card, the receipt, everything. She didn't speak. She just stared at them, her fingers tightening slightly around the phone. I waited, watching her carefully, letting the silence stretch between us. Finally, she exhaled slowly and set the phone down. "I can explain." I leaned back. "Go ahead." She hesitated, biting her lip, like she was trying to decide which version of the truth to give me. "It's not what you think." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Really?" "Because it looks exactly like what I think." She swallowed hard, looking away for a moment before meeting my eyes again. "It was just once. It didn't mean anything." I felt my jaw tighten, but I didn't let my expression change. "Who?" She didn't answer right away. That told me everything I needed to know. "Emily." My voice was steady, cold. "Who?" She finally looked down, her fingers twisting together in her lap. "Someone from work." I nodded slowly, exhaling through my nose. "How long?" She flinched slightly, like she hadn't expected me to ask that. "A few months." That was it. The final confirmation. The last nail in the coffin of our marriage. I sat there, staring at the woman I had spent years building a life with, realizing that I didn't recognize her at all. I pushed my chair back, standing up slowly. "I'm done." Her head snapped up. "Wait." No, my voice was sharp, cutting through whatever excuse she was about to throw at me. "You don't get to talk your way out of this. You don't get to lie to me anymore." She stood up, reaching for me, but I stepped back. "Please, we can work through this." I shook my head. "We really can't." She opened her mouth, but I didn't wait to hear whatever she was about to say. I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there, the truth finally laid out between us, with nowhere left to hide. Emily stood there, her face twisted with panic, her hands hovering in the air like she didn't know whether to reach for me or let me go. I watched her carefully, waiting for the next lie, the next excuse, the next desperate attempt to justify what she had done. She had already confessed, admitted that it had been going on for months, confirmed what I had already known in my gut. But now came the part one was really interested in, how far she was willing to go to save herself. Her voice was uneven when she finally spoke. "Please, we can talk about this. We can fix it. I swear it wasn't." "It wasn't what?" I cut her off before she could finish that sentence because I already knew exactly where it was going. She was going to tell me it wasn't serious, that it didn't mean anything, that it was just a mistake. But she had already said it had been going on for months, and nobody makes the same mistake over and over again unless they want to. She took a shaky breath, her eyes darting to the table where my phone still sat, the pictures staring up at her like undeniable proof of her betrayal. "I love you," she whispered, like that was supposed to make any of this better. I let out a slow breath, shaking my head as I finally let myself feel something other than cold detachment. "No, you don't. You don't get to say that." Her eyes widened slightly, her hands clenching into fists at her sides. "I do. I never stopped loving you. I laughed, and for the first time, it was real. Not because any of this was funny, but because it was incredible how predictable people were when they got caught. "You never stopped loving me, but you started sleeping with someone else behind my back? That's interesting." Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't care. Not anymore. She wasn't crying because she regretted what she had done. She was crying because she had been caught. I turned away, walking toward the stairs, but she moved quickly, stepping in front of me before I could leave the room. Please, just let me explain. I swear it wasn't what you think. I held up a hand, stopping her. You already explained. Months, Emily. You made this decision over and over again. You had plenty of time to stop. But you didn't. She shook her head, tears slipping down her cheeks now. It wasn't serious. It was just an escape. I was feeling it. I tilted my head slightly, looking at her with something close to curiosity. An escape from what? From me? From our life? Her lip trembled, but she didn't answer. That was the moment I knew she wasn't sorry. Not for what she had done. Not for sneaking around behind my back. She was only sorry that she had to face the consequences. I stepped around her, walking past her like she wasn't even there. We're done. She spun around, her voice rising. No, we're not. We can fix this. We can go to therapy. We can now. I stopped at the base of the stairs and turned to look at her one last time. There's nothing to fix. Her face crumpled, and she took a desperate step toward me, but I was already moving up the stairs. I didn't need to hear anything else. I had given her the chance to explain, and all she had given me were weak excuses. I had wasted enough time on this conversation. I went straight to the bedroom and pulled a suitcase out of the closet. I wasn't going to be the one who stayed in this house, in this life she had turned into a lie. She could have it. I packed quickly, throwing clothes into the suitcase without bothering to fold anything. None of it mattered anymore. She appeared in the doorway, watching me with wide, desperate eyes. Where are you going? I zipped up the suitcase and grabbed it off the bed. Somewhere that isn't here. She shook her head violently, stepping into the room like she was going to physically stop me. You're just going to leave? Just like that? I shrugged. Just like you did. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. She had nothing left to say, nothing that would change the way this was going to end. I walked past her without hesitation, rolling the suitcase behind me, my footsteps steady as I moved toward the front door. She followed, still pleading, still reaching for something that wasn't there anymore. Please, don't do this. We can work through it. I'll do anything. I'll end it. I stopped at the door, gripping the handle for just a second before turning back to look at her. You already ended it, Emily. The only thing left is for you to deal with the fallout. And with that, I walked out. I walked out the front door, pulling my suitcase behind me without looking back. Emily was still calling my name, her voice cracking as she begged me to stop, but I didn't slow down. I had already wasted enough time on her lies, and there was nothing left to say. I got into my car, started the engine, and pulled away from the house, leaving behind the life I thought I had built with her. My hands were steady on the wheel, my mind clear, but something heavy sat in my chest, a pressure that refused to go away. I had spent years trusting her, believing in her, and now it all felt like a joke. I had been the fool, blind to the truth that had been right in front of me for months. I drove without a plan, just needing to get away, needing space to breathe. After an hour, I pulled into a parking lot and just sat there, staring at the dashboard, trying to process everything. The betrayal, the lies, the fact that she had stood there and looked me in the eye while still trying to convince me it wasn't what I thought. I could still hear her voice, still see the way her hands trembled when she realized there was no talking her way out of this. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat. Emily. I let it ring until it stopped, then watched as another call came in right after. I ignored that one too. A minute later, a text popped up. Emily, please, just tell me where you are. We need to talk. I stared at the screen, feeling nothing. Whatever she wanted to say, I wasn't interested. She had her chance to talk when I confronted her, and all she had given me were excuses. Another message came in before I could even put the phone down. Emily, I know I hurt you. I know I messed up. But please don't just walk away from us like this. I turned the phone over so I wouldn't have to look at it. She wasn't worried about losing me. She was worried about what came next, about what people would think, about how she would explain this to her friends and family. I had been the stable one, the dependable one, the one who always fixed things. She had taken that for granted, assumed I would always be there, no matter what she did. But this wasn't something that could be fixed. She had made sure that the moment she decided I wasn't enough for her. I leaned back in my seat, closing my eyes for a moment. I needed to do more than just leave. I needed to make sure she felt this, that she understood what she had done. I wasn't the type to lash out, to scream or break things, but I wasn't going to let her walk away from this without consequences. I picked up my phone, scrolling through my contacts until I found the number I was looking for. It rang twice before he answered. Hey, man. Everything okay? I exhaled slowly. Not really. You home? Yeah, come over. Doors open. I hung up and started the car again, turning out of the parking lot and heading toward the only person I trusted right now. Mark had been my best friend since college, the guy who had been there through everything, every high, every low, every stupid mistake. If there was anyone who would know what to do next, it was him. When I pulled into his driveway, he was already standing on the porch, arms crossed, watching me closely. I grabbed my suitcase and walked up the steps, barely making it inside before he shut the door behind me. "Tell me," he said, his voice calm but firm. I set my suitcase down and ran a hand over my face, trying to find the right words. "Emily cheated on me." Mark didn't react right away. He just studied me, his jaw tightening slightly. "How long?" "Months." I confronted her. She admitted it. His expression darkened, but he didn't interrupt. He just nodded, waiting for me to continue. I packed a bag and left. She's been blowing up my phone ever since. I sat down on his couch, leaning forward with my elbows on my knees. I don't know what the hell to do next. Mark sat across from me, rubbing a hand over his jaw. "You filing?" I looked up at him. "Yeah." "Good. You want me to call my lawyer?" I nodded. Mark had been through his own divorce a few years back, and his lawyer had been ruthless. "That's exactly what I needed." "I'll take care of it," he said simply. I let out a slow breath, feeling some of the tension in my chest ease. "Thanks." Mark leaned back, watching me carefully. "You want to get back at her?" I looked at him, considering the question. She doesn't deserve to walk away from this like nothing happened. A slow, knowing smile crossed his face. "Then let's make sure she doesn't." Mark handed me a beer, sitting down across from me with a knowing look on his face. He had always been the kind of guy who believed in getting even, and I could tell by the way he leaned forward that he was already thinking of ways to make Emily's life miserable. I wasn't interested in destroying her, not in the way Mark probably wanted me to, but I wasn't going to make this easy for her either. She had spent months lying to me, sneaking around behind my back, playing the role of a loving wife while carrying on with someone else. The least she could do now was suffer the consequences. Mark's voice was calm, steady. "So, what do you want to do first?" I took a sip of my beer, staring at the floor for a moment before answering. "I want her to know she lost everything." He nodded slowly. "Then we do this right. First, you lock her out of everything. Bank accounts, credit cards, anything she has access to. I'll get my lawyer to send the paperwork first thing in the morning." I pulled out my phone, already logging into the bank app. She's not on my main account. We kept separate finances, but she's got a card on my emergency fund. I clicked a few buttons, removed her access, and stared at the screen for a moment before setting the phone down. "Done." Mark smirked. "Good. Now for the fun part. How much does her family know?" I exhaled through my nose, already knowing where this was going. Probably nothing. She wouldn't have told them yet. He reached for his own phone. "Then let's fix that." I didn't stop him. Emily had always been close with her parents, and they had always liked me. Her dad, especially, had a low tolerance for bullshit, and I knew that if he found out what she had done, he wouldn't take her side. I sat there in silence as Mark scrolled through his contacts, pressing the call button before putting his phone on speaker. The call rang twice before a deep voice answered. "Mark? Everything okay?" Mark didn't waste time. "Hey, Mr. Callahan, I wanted to give you a heads up about something. Steve's here with me, and he just found out Emily's been cheating on him." There was silence on the other end, then a sharp exhale. "You're serious?" I leaned forward. I caught her. She admitted it. Mr. Callahan was quiet for a long moment, then his voice came back, lower and colder than before. "I'm sorry, son. I really am. You don't deserve that." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Thanks." "What's she saying?" "She's been calling and texting, trying to fix things. But it's over." Mr. Callahan let out a breath. "I'll be having a conversation with her." "And her mother?" I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "I appreciate it." Mark smirked as he ended the call. "That'll ruin her week." I leaned back, feeling the weight in my chest lighten just slightly. "Good." Mark wasn't done yet. "What about her job? You want to hit her there too?" I thought about it. Emily had always been proud of her career, always talked about how she worked twice as hard as everyone else to earn her position. I had no idea if her affair had anything to do with work, but considering she had told me it was with someone she worked with, it wasn't a stretch to assume people already knew. I tapped my fingers against my knee, considering my options. If he works with her, HR should know. Mark grinned. "Now you're thinking." I pulled out my phone again, scrolling through my photos until I found what I was looking for, the picture of the hotel receipt with Emily's name on it. I attached it to an email, kept the message simple and professional, and sent it straight to her company's HR department. If they had policies against workplace affairs, they'd deal with it from there. Mark watched me with approval. Now she loses her job too. I set my phone down, exhaling slowly. I don't care if they fire her or not. I just want him to know I know. Mark clinked his beer against mine. Either way, you're winning. The rest of the night passed in a blur of conversations and quiet moments, and by the time I finally crashed on Mark's couch, I felt something I hadn't felt since I first found that damn earring. Relief. The anger was still there, the betrayal still fresh, but for the first time, I felt like I was back in control. Emily had made her choices, and now she had to live with them. The next morning, my phone was filled with missed calls and unread messages. Emily, her mother, even some of our mutual friends. I ignored them all. Mark's lawyer had already started the paperwork, and by the end of the week, she'd be served. There was no point in dragging this out any longer. A few days later, I got the final confirmation that things were falling apart for her. Emily's dad called me personally to apologize again, told me she had broken down when confronted, admitted everything, tried to justify it but got nowhere. Her mother wasn't speaking to her. Her job had called her in for a meeting. And the guy she had been sneaking around with? He had ghosted her completely. Mark was right. I had won. By the time the divorce was finalized, Emily had lost almost everything. She had to move out of the house, had to start over from scratch, had to live with the consequences of her decisions. I didn't look back. I had spent years believing in her, trusting her, building a life with her. But in the end, she had destroyed it with her own choices. And I had made damn sure she paid for it.